Hello, CIRF family. It is time for another CIRF report. This week, we are going to have the air brakes put down or deployed. Everything's going to start slowing down in terms of air signs and astrology. And we're going to jump into Pisces. All right. This week is from the 13th to the 19th of February. And here's our overview slideshow for triangulating the influence. Overall, I'm assessing that the biggest energy you're going to feel throughout the week is this energy shear from astrological air. We'll talk about, what all that means. You're seeing this in Aquarian kind of style, disclosure, utopian kind of promises and revealing all these secrets and everything. That's the air. And then all of a sudden, Mercury's going to leave Aquarius, and then Sun's going to leave Aquarius and go into Pisces. So basically what we have is an energy shear. So the DreamBot, the collective unconscious, is mirroring the first half of our week. The first half is still air dominant. And the last part of our week is more of the I-Ching, standstill. Everything starts becoming much more watery, intuitive, and Piscean. We'll talk all about that. Meanwhile, we have the waning gibbous moon, which is starting to slow down in the lunar cycle. So that's a synergistic with what we're seeing in the other signs. So we already talked about Mercury entering Pisces. We have a Mars trine Saturn to go over. Sun enters Pisces in the later part of the week, and we end on our last day with a grand water trine. But the biggest news energetically is just that sudden slowing of the air archetype. All right, let's get going with more specifics. Big shout out to Gaetano Magnifico, 1836. What a handle name. And I'll admit I don't fully understand the full concept of your talent, but with everything going on in the world of governments, it all makes sense for me. I think it really does parallel very well with the astrology. And obviously what we're trying to do here is combine some other sources so that we can button up how it will generally feel. So you get it's one thing to have just, okay, Sun goes into Pisces. Well, there's all sorts of other things that are happening as well. What does it feel like all put together? But one thing I do agree on as well, a beautiful world is coming and nothing can stop it. Stay frosty. Stay frosty, by the way. We have wintry mix outside. People are scared to get out, understandably. Haven't seen the sun in quite some time here in Arkansas. But here's the DreamBot. Number one word is ARM, A-R-M. And, there's obviously different ways you can interpret that. But when you see words like air and killer and fragment and demons and point and flying, it has an air war kind of a flair to it. Now, is this as above, so below? So archetypically, we have the air signs, and mentally we're kind of up in the clouds looking at this observer kind of stance. This is the archetype of astrological air, but it is contentious, war. So this DreamBot is not necessarily saying that an air war is going to break out. I know a lot of pundits, a lot of predictions out there about war and conflict, but I'm not saying that this doesn't mean it, but I'm not saying it does mean it either. Just contentious, clearly air symbology here. And then the blue words are very active. And so so other than sitting, but flying, focus, driving, point, walk, party, and run. So very active. The collective unconscious is very active, probably feeling maybe perhaps pent up, but also things are moving. And energetically, archetypically, we're not in that stagnant political government status quo. Things are changing, and the people who are wanting it to stay the same are looking very scared. They're not adapting, but clearly the collective unconscious is on the move energetically. All right. All right. Here we are with our astrology. Now on this chart, just note that two of our planets, Mercury first, then Sun, are both going into Pisces. That's really the big news here. This is probably one of the more important charts. What I have here is just this air dominance, Aquarian, mainly Aquarian, is dropping down. So this is where Mercury goes into Pisces, and then Sun goes into Pisces. So that's why they're a mirror image of each other. Aquarius disintegrates this week. Pisces, very robust and gets very strong by the end of the week. All right, now here's your picture. Now try to think of some of the things that are happening in the world today, because we have featuring the sun. We always start on any energy snapshot with the sun, the most dominant energy. Sun and Mercury in Aquarius, signifying a strong focus on innovative ideas, unconventional communication, and a desire for intellectual stimulation. But it's magnified. Both of these are in a square over to Uranus. So this in Taurus, adding an element of sudden changes, lots of changes, rebellion against the status quo. We're totally seeing that. We're also seeing the resistance of the rebellion and a need for freedom in both thoughts and actions. Then the next dominant energy is going to be the moon. The moon's in a waning gibbous and currently in Virgo. But the waning gibbous is a time in the lunar cycle that's roughly 29 days. It's a time of reflection, refinement, and integration of experiences, and in a very detailed sort of way, thoughtful way with Virgo, at least for now. And then we have Mars and Saturn in a pretty tight trine right now at the beginning. And that's a harmonious blend of emotional drive and spiritual discipline. Both of these are in water signs, and supports the channeling of intuitive energy into constructive outlets. And then you have Venus in Aries. And this brings a bold and passionate approach to relationships, your individual needs in those relationships, your personal desires. And then we've got Pluto. Pluto's sort of all by himself. There is sort of a sextile there with Venus, but this brings about sort of like a power struggle to relationships potentially. But Pluto in Aquarius is the long-term collective transformation towards greater innovation and humanitarian focus. Lastly, but not least, we have Neptune over the North Node in Pisces, and Neptune in the very late stages of Pisces. So that'll be a monumental shift later, when not this week, but Neptune going into Aries soon. And Neptune's conjunction with the North Node particularly emphasizes the importance of spiritual growth, compassion, dissolution of ego boundaries. And it is a influence into the future. It's a look into the future with those ideas. But putting all that together, that archetype, is still the Aquarian dominance, air dominance of intuitive tech visionary, the utopian social reformer. We're seeing that energy right now. That'll go on hyperdrive on Thursday the 13th. Perhaps the evolutionary bridge builder, innovative paradigm shifter. And a lot of that's going to start dying out. But let's talk about Friday the 14th. This is Happy Valentine's Day. And this is when Mercury goes into Pisces at 6:06 a.m. So at the very beginning, early Valentine's Day. During this transit, people are going to find their thought processes become more imaginative, intuitive, just generally less structured, less crisp. Communication takes on a more empathetic and sensitive tone. Individuals become more attuned to the emotions and needs of others. The alignment encourages creative expression, artistic pursuits, deeper connection to your inner world. However, then there's a nebulous nature of Pisces, can also lead to mental confusion, misunderstandings, lack of clarity in communication. And that's why this picture is possible for our archetype. Remember that Mercury just came out of exaltation in Aquarius. So sharp, quick thoughts now are harder to retrieve. Memories harder to retrieve. People may find it challenging to articulate their thoughts or make concrete decisions. It's going to be harder to decide things. But you might feel enhanced intuition and creativity. Cognition steer towards empathy and compassion, maybe some like self-sacrifice in there, and heightened spiritual awareness and connection and desires, urges mentally. And in Saturday, the focus, I point you to the moon. You look at all these alignments that are associated with the moon. The emotions could be all over the place. But if you compare that with the alignments elsewhere, everything else is sort of aging out and very weak. And so if we compartmentalize the emotions, that's what the moon represents, the emotions of it all. Other than the emotions, the planets are sort of the way they just kind of like alone in their own space with these alignments waning out. And so it has a more of a balanced feel to it, even though the emotions are pretty strong. You have an opposition to Venus, and we've already talked about what she wants and desires and how it affects us. But we have a trine also to Pluto. So with Venus and Pluto connected to the emotions, that can potentially get into more of like power struggles, potentially. But we also have an inconjunct to Mercury. And Mercury, we've already talked about, delineated in Pisces, could be a moderating feel to the power struggles. So can't we just all get along? Those are kind of the thoughts. Hey, I'll do this thing so that we can just get along. So I think it all flows pretty well together, kind of cancels out, or we have solutions along with any problems that arise. So that's cool. Sunday, Sun is in the very last stages of Aquarius. So happy birthday to any of you late stage Aquarians. And the waning gibbous moon is also in an air sign. But this waning gibbous reminder represents a time of reflection, and in Libra, a time for thinking about how to get back into balance. Might feel out of balance in a way and needing to get back to balance. Harmony in relationships as this lunar cycle begins to wind down. The next major milestone for the moon is the last quarter moon, but it's not going to be this week. Strangely, we got one of those rare weeks where we don't have any one of the full moon, new moon, first quarter, or last quarter moon. We just have the waning gibbous, which is fine, but you hardly ever see a full CIRF week like this. So it's unusual. All right. And then on Monday, this is the last day for the sun in Aquarius. And after today, then, look at what we have. The only planet remaining in Aquarius is Pluto. So let's review what Pluto's plight here is. It will last roughly 20 years. And Pluto transiting Aquarius is going to see massive changes in social structures, possibly a lot of technological advancement. I mean, not possible. I mean, it's almost guaranteed. Already seeing it. And the way we connect with one another on a global scale. This is potentially going to be humanity's dark night of the soul, all because of Pluto in Aquarius. Because during this period, you might witness a breakdown of outdated systems, a rebuilding in its place. This is the rising phoenix archetype. We might have a more progressive more progressive systems in place that better serve the collective good. However, the transit also brings about challenges related to power struggles. Rebellion against authority is going to be a theme for 20 years, at least. I mean, you always find rebellion against authority, but you'll have more of it. Clearly more. Not everyone will be rebelling against authority, but they'll have that subtle influence. And you'll just see it more. And the potential misuse of advanced technologies is possible during this period. So anyway, let's move on. Now here's where the shear happens between Monday to Tuesday. Because remember, the sun is moving out of Aquarius. But at the same time, strangely, the moon is leaving an air sign going into a water sign. So on Tuesday the 18th, we get like super water in the background. We have 6 planets in water, and it's mutable water, which means it's Pisces. Well, that makes sense. So now we have Neptune, North Node, Saturn, Mercury, and Sun starting at 4:06 a.m. on 18 February. We have all those planets in Pisces. So when the sun transits in, the sign, this is Pisces, the sign associated with intuition, compassion, spirituality, imagination, self-sacrifice, heightened sense of emotional sensitivity, empathy, desire for connection, both with others, but also the transcendent, the divine. This alignment can bring about a period of introspection, creative exploration, deeper understanding of your inner world. And during this time, individuals may feel more attuned to your intuition and psychic abilities, as well as stronger sense of compassion for others. I mean, just with that water dominance alone. But we have, so this is separate. This is the signature background energetically, and it's Pisces. Then you just look over here where all the planets are, and it's Pisces. I mean, it makes sense why we have a mutable water background, but they're both both a match, including the moon and a water sign and Mars. Okay, so possible archetypes: the compassionate soul healer, the intuitive dream weaver, the imaginative visionary artist, the divine connection mediator. All those are possible. And then we end on a grand water trine. Grand water trine is when we have all trines connecting these planets in water signs. It's highly favorable, very harmonious aspect pattern, and supportive and flowing relationships with each other. This alignment can bring about heightened emotional intelligence, intuitive understanding, and a deep connection to your inner world. It's a strong creative potential and may coincide with periods of heightened inspiration, psychic abilities, and a desire to explore one's own soul path. Whoops. There we go. Cool how the Grand Water Trine just matches that picture real well. There you go, folks. Enjoy the last day. And here's the I-Ching to button up our energy in periods of standstill or stagnation. Can you feel it? It's the shear into, going from flying along in Aquarius, everything goes into Pisces. So it's not like it slows down, but mentally slower. The life is much more fluid and intuitive, like we talked about. So the I Ching says standstill, periods of stagnation or confusion, disorder can prevail. Yeah, there's a lot of change amidst all this as well. Trying to assimilate it all. Powers of clarity and creativity are on the decline. Inmates are overrunning the prison and its guards. And line 1 says, small-minded forces are advancing now, so it is best to reduce your visibility. Others of like mind may follow you into a temporary shelter from the conflict. It is through this means that plans can be made for future action. Yeah, that's not all that clear. So just basically, what do you feel with hexagram 12 and line 1? Well, a sense of being pulled apart or torn between opposing forces, a feeling of needing to withdraw or step back. That's a match to the lunar cycle. Inner tension between wanting to act and knowing whether or not you should wait. A contemplative state of observing without engaging. All right, before we get to the solution, let's talk about the overall influence. All right, were you wondering what the air brake is? It's right here. I used to fly jets, so this is the air brake. Just helps you slow down whenever you need it, particularly on landing. And after landing, post-landing, you're going to see that. Aquarian air starts off strong this week, but when the air brakes will be deployed energetically. Oh yes, Aquarian dominance dives into the grand waters of Pisces. Also in the energy mix is a waning gibbous moon, which synergizes the feelings of deceleration, spiritual reflection, and ramped up yin states. Yin is about receiving and accepting and not fighting, not resisting, just letting things flow. This energy shear is very pronounced when the sun enters Pisces on February 18th. Because Mercury has already done it earlier in this week, and Saturn and Neptune are already there. They are already enjoying the Piscean fruits of oneness, compassion, and intuition. All right, that's the influence, but we have some very important concepts to talk about in our solution. So let's get to that. First, when we put the change line in, you get innocence, 25. So now we're looking for behaviors, because that's what our solution implies. Recommendations for behavior to best be suited. The best behavioral recommendations best suited for success given the energies we just discussed. Innocence implies a natural harmlessness and openness and pure intentions ensouled by ulterior motives. Innocence springs from a heart that remains open to joy and wonder. Innocence, when guided by a firm faith in what is just and balanced, brings supreme success. Here are some, like a list of recommendations for behaviors with hexagram 25. Act spontaneously, without calculation. Speak truthfully. Show genuine emotional reactions without masking them. Take action without overthinking. Show enthusiasm without self-consciousness. Demonstrate trust in others without requiring proof. Respond to nature's rhythms instinctively. And now to get our other technologies, we're going to put it into our conversion chart. We're going from tropical to the Rave mandala. And the biggest news, here's something really important. We're going to go deep on this Rave mandala because 2 of our planets flow through it in 1 week. This is quite unusual. Doesn't happen very often. And it's going to be right at the line of tropical Pisces. That's hexagram 30, gate 30 of the Rave mandala. And we're going to go do a deep dive, and you're going to be floored, like I was floored, about what's happening on the collective scale, as above, so below. This 30 is happening, and all week's going to be really strong as Mercury goes through it and the sun goes through it. So then we also have Sidereal Aquarius. All right, here is our Rave mandala. Pay attention. In my opinion, this speaks volumes about what's happening, and that's why I want to do a deep dive on this I-Ching reading. This is from the Rave mandala. We have hexagram 30, line 6, called enforcement. It's the discipline to maintain right action, the assertiveness to purge the inferior forces while accepting to lead the weak, the strength to eliminate negative feelings. You know, when you have to like fire bad actors from a workplace, that doesn't feel good. It's not like people enjoy, well, I'm sure some leaders enjoy that, but generally that's not a fun thing. So negative feelings, but we are okay with those so that we get rid of the bad actors, the weeds, in hopes of keeping the collective or the group healthy. All right, so let's go deep on this. And this line deals with the challenge of maintaining emotional clarity while handling relationships and leadership responsibilities. There's 3 key themes in this gate line. Number 1, discipline. And leadership. 2 is leadership, and 3 is discernment. So we need the leadership part is you need to be willing to be a good leader, which means that you have to cull the bad actors to maintain the health of the group. All right, so that's the discernment. The 2 planets that we have aligned with the increment and the decrement is Mars. Mars is the aspect of being decisive to help to lead and to cull as necessary and maintain standards. When Mars is too strong in this continuum, the leader becomes militant and strongly attached to standards and outcomes. It doesn't care about feelings. It doesn't care enough about feelings. That's why we have the moon. You also need the moon side of this to be a full, balanced line and gate. All right, the moon is nurturing the group. It's fostering synergy. It's making people feel included and valued. When the moon is too strong, though, it fails to address contamination. It begins to complain and guilt trip or emotionally manipulate instead of addressing the actual problem, instead of going up into the Mars and getting rid of those problems or putting discipline down for bad actors. So we need both. So here's some examples of how this plays out. Imagine the garden keeper, a kind garden keeper. They nurture all the plants with care. We know that the weeds must be pulled to protect the garden, but pulling the weeds is the Mars aspect, and but sometimes hesitates too long, and it allows all the invasive species to spread. So that's a little bit too moon dominant. So remember, we need both. We need to have some strength in yang in order to get rid of the contamination, but also the moon aspect to care about the group. All right, here's another example. A wise teacher patiently guides all the struggling students, but occasionally you have the disruptive students in class. So you might give too many, if you're moon dominant, you might give too many second chances out of compassion, or you might just all out ignore a fight that's happening between 2 students. And that fight is distracting all the students and consuming everybody's time. So if the teacher is ignoring it, that's too moon dominant, where they should be picking up some more Mars aspects and addressing the conflict. All right, putting all this together here, I'm going to put this into full application. And why don't you imagine what's happening in like Doge or the government and the oversight? And it's just amazing how this as above, so below matches what's happening in the collective. So imagine a tribe and imagine leading that tribe, or visualize the tribe leader. Now, the moon aspect is indicative of the good leader who can kind of pick up intuitively, or just it could be obvious that there's a conflict between two of the people in the tribe. Well, even if it's just a subtle tension, they'll be able to pick that up. That's the moon aspect here, and that's good. And but now you need to go approach the conflict. You need to go towards it, not ignore it, not have other people deal with it. You need to have the strength, the Mars, to go towards that conflict and tension and resolve it. And that is the Mars part, because it knows that it's toxic to hold on to this conflict. It could mean the toxicity could mean the destruction of the tribe itself. That's the moon aspect, keeping everything cohesive and worried about the overall health. He then threatens consequences to the conflicted people, or casts them out equally to protect the tribe. That's the key. Casting out contamination to protect the tribe. That's the Mars aspect. All right. So now look in, because clearly the collective is going through this, or at least in the United States it is, and I think it's more global. But make sure you're doing this in your own life. Look for, weeds in your garden. It's a metaphor. Look for the part of that you're leading in your own life. Are you willing to cast out the contamination? Are you willing to face the problems and do something about it, the Mars? But not getting too militant and too strict on the standards to where you don't look for the overall cohesiveness and honor the moon aspect. So we need to do this in our own lives as well. All right, now it's time to discuss the solution. Remember, we have the innocence is just the wonderment of being a child again. And there is sort of a naivety there. But we also did a deep dive into the Rave mandala 36 line 6. It's enforcement for the greater good. And this is the tribe analogy, where you've got the leader who is addressing the conflict between these two individuals. Then you have Sidereal Aquarius and the waning gibbous moon. So the first overlap with all that is the return to innocence with regards to the collective well-being. That's a key one, because it puts every one of these together, including the moon is emotion, empathy. We talked about how the moon correlates with the Rave mandala. So open your mind and see clearly what has been rotting, and advocate for purging that which decays the greater good. It's really an important Rave mandala line. Gates, really important gate, and paradox, both collectively. And so I want you to make sure that you're doing this with your own individual life. Maybe as an example, in this office, I can see all these weeds, metaphoric for just junk, just sitting on my desk, and I haven't been willing to do anything about it. So I've been more moon in my office. I need to pick up my Mars a little bit more just to be balanced. Okay, number 2, explore the Rave and apply it to your own life. How attuned are you to your garden, tribe, or project? How well have you purged the contaminants or pulled the weeds? As above, so below. Also sit back and watch how this is playing out with, government purging. It's amazing. It's just incredible. You'll see it two times. You'll see Mercury going through that line and then Sun going through that line in the same week, next week. All right, and then peer into the future. This is a lot more sidereal Aquarius. Peer into the future with independent thinking. That's also the innocence of I-Ching 25. Share your wisdom with others. Then finally, just the waning gibbous moon. Reflect on your lunar goals and make sure you complete some of them or all of them. We're coming up on the last quarter moon, which means you should have those finished. Your 30-day lunar goals finished. Now, socially, this is never saying that you need to be out in public or away from public. It's just giving you an idea for is it warranted to be social or not social? Well, it doesn't really. I-Ching 25 doesn't really specify one way or the other. The Rave mandala is a lot more social, particularly with like kind of leadership stuff. And then number 3, waning gibbous moon, it could go either way. I think it would tend to be a little more introspective and introverted. And then 4 is I mean, it can get along socially, but I think generally it's going to be much less social. So anyway, it's very neutral. Socially, it's really neutral. It's whatever you need, do it. Yin and yang meter, I think it's right in the middle. We're getting closer. You can imagine as we started the week, it's probably more yang, and by the end of the week, it's a lot more yin. And then next week, when we get the last quarter, it'll probably slide even more. The lunar cycle is the strongest determinator, I think, of this yin-yang cycle, but we do include all of it as well. There's not a lot of yang other than that Mars aspect for the Rave. When you're pulling the weeds, or when you're pushing the contaminants and throwing them away for looking out for the greater good, that's the Mars aspect that I was talking about. All right, everybody. How'd we do today? 37 minutes. Interesting how all of this correlates with what we're seeing in the collective. Amazing. Thanks for being here, everybody, and I appreciate all your comments. I take it very seriously. Thank you for supporting us, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.